Welcome to the Manufacturing Masters Podcast with your host, Allison DeFord.
Hey, friend, let's talk for a minute about investing in your business. You know, all that new equipment that you'd like to buy or upgrade, the people that you'd like to obtain and train, that new ERP system or software that you've been putting off maybe for a couple years, but you know it would really make a difference. Yeah, all that stuff. Well, what if I told you that there are millions and millions of dollars available to help you pay for this stuff? I'm talking about grants. Now, before you tune out, I want you to tune in. Today, I've got with me expert Micki Vandeloo. She is the president at Lakeview Consulting. And I'll tell you what, she has been in the manufacturing industry for 25 years. And prior to becoming a consultant and a grant writer, she understands your business. She has the experiences and she has seen the struggles with funding improvements. And she wanted to do something about it. Wow, are you going to learn a lot of how to apply for these grants, how to find out where the heck they are, and how to successfully obtain them. I'm telling you what, this is an exciting topic. And you're going to hear today from the lady who is funding the success of the manufacturing industry. And she's helping people like you do it one grant at a time. So join me and Micki and get out a pen and paper because you're going to want to take some notes and we're going to help you improve your business. Everybody, here we go. So Micki, I am so excited that you are here today. And I know that our manufacturing audience is going to be replaying this over and over because we're going to talk about how to get the money, right? And not just from sales, but through grants. And I feel like you are the grant queen, if I can dub you that. You are literally funding the success of the manufacturing industry. And so I am thrilled to learn from you today and get some really juicy insight on getting grants. Number one, finding them. Number two, writing them properly, because I know that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And three, to stop procrastinating and go after this money that's available to manufacturers. So I would love to know, and I think our audience would as well, is there a ton of grant money out there? Like, or is this something we're hearing about, or is this real?
Oh, it's very real. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love to tell people about grant funding, particularly manufacturers, because that's the space that I'm in. And the money is out there. There are millions of dollars of grant money available. Now, are they available to manufacturers exclusively? No. It's still very much the case that nonprofits have a much bigger world of grant funding than for-profits. But what I can tell you is, especially since COVID, especially since the supply chain issues that came out of COVID, and especially since the recognition of the importance of manufacturing to the U.S. economy, all those things have contributed to the greater investment in manufacturing. So yes, there are millions of dollars of funding. They are available from state and federal sources. A lot of states have also embraced manufacturing by increasing their investments in manufacturing. For example, I was just working with a client in New York State. New York State has a really nice manufacturing grant right now, and they probably wouldn't have had that 3 or 4 years ago. But again, all that realization and all that focus that came on American supply chains and the need to bolster American supply chains has really flowed down to money for the American manufacturing sector. So yes, absolutely, there's money available.
Great news. I love hearing that. And do you feel like the majority, or this may be too broad, do a lot of manufacturers think about, and this is based on your experience, they think about, hey, we should probably apply for a grant. And then it kind of gets pushed to the wayside because they're busy putting out fires. Is this pretty common?
Very, very much so. Yeah. Yeah. So what I found, I worked in manufacturing for 25 years. And what I found is everybody in manufacturing is really good at fighting fires, right? We're really good at being reactive. We're really good at, the next thing that's come along, the next customer problem, the next big technology. But what I found with all of my employers, clients, what I still find with my clients is when all those investments are getting ready to take place, there's not that thought of, I wonder if I can get a grant for that. So I've had it happen so many times in my career as a consultant to manufacturers. I will talk to somebody and they will say, oh, we just put in this $5 million addition. We invested, $1 million in equipment, but yet they didn't go looking for a grant. And because they had already done it, grants won't fund what's already happened. So because we didn't talk earlier, because we didn't have that conversation, they really didn't even think about grants. What I love is when I talk to clients that say, we're on the cusp, but we really know we want to invest in our facility. We know we need to invest in our facility. We know we need to go overseas and do trade missions. We know we need to go, we need to expand our markets. We know we need to do all these things. We know we need to hire people. We know we need to implement an apprenticeship program, but we feel like we need funding to do that. That is where the sweet spot is with grants, because if you know you're going to do something, then there's a possibility that you can take the time to apply for the grants and then get those grants and do what you need to do. So very much, I think a lot of manufacturers, one, because they don't know that the grants are out there. I mean, unless they see a newsletter or they see and by the way, I do have a newsletter and you can subscribe to it and then they will know that there are manufacturing grants that are out there because that's what that newsletter is about. But unless they see something come through their email, unless they see something, hear something on the radio, and typically when they do, by the way, the grant's already been awarded because that's when the publicity goes out about the grant. Unfortunately, grants are kind of the most well-kept secret, unfortunately, with a lot of states, especially. What I've found is they don't publicize they have grants, but yet they have to spend out the money on the grants. If they don't spend the money allocated to a grant program, that state program will likely not get that funding again. So they put themselves in a bad situation, but mostly manufacturers just don't know about grants. I have run across some manufacturers that have heard of some grants, but they just don't want to pursue them. I talked to a customer up in New York State one time, and it's a large company, one that everybody would know. And the owner said, I just don't feel right taking money away from other more worthy applicants, other more worthy nonprofits. Well, the mere fact is that most state budgets will have a separate budget line item for grants than they do for helping, for example, nonprofits and health services organizations. So they're totally separate pots of money. So that goes to the third thing. A lot of manufacturers don't understand grants. They don't understand what it takes to find a grant, what it takes to get a grant, and they don't have the time. So what I tell my clients to summarize all this is that we will help you, we'll walk with you, we will find the grants for you. We will set a funding strategy for you. We will make sure you've got all the documents in place, and we will walk hand in hand with you to get these grants. Because if they don't have that, because of all the reasons that I said before, they just aren't going to pursue them.
Yes. And okay, I just learned a lot from what you just mentioned there. So thank you for that. That's some really good insight. Now, if I'm the manufacturer listening right now, my question would be, okay, so let's say we hire a company like yours. How much is this going to cost us? Do you take a percentage of the grant money that how does that work?
No, so we charge on a flat fee. So one thing that every client needs to know, and that I try to make sure every client knows it, if you pay somebody a percentage of a grant, by the way, if I would have done that, I've gotten over $100 million for my clients. I wouldn't be sitting here right now looking out at whatever I'm looking at. I'd be on a beach. But what I tell people is the vast majority of grants, 99.9% of the grants will not pay for a grant writer's fees. That's the first and foremost.
Oh, okay.
So even if you say, I'm taking it out of a different budget to pay you, even if I'm calling it a bonus, if you get a grant, and the larger grants in particular, because you will be audited if you get those grants. So you'll be audited by the funder. If they even sniff out that you paid me right after I submitted or right after you got awarded a grant, they're going to start poking a little bit deeper, and they're going to know that you did something ineligible, and you could stand then to lose that grant. And that's the last thing I want for my clients. The last thing I want is for them to get a grant and that grant be taken away. So that's the first reason we charge a flat fee. So we charge based on the amount of time we expect to spend writing the grant, the complexity of the grant. So if a grant is 5 pages and it's a very simple grant, a state grant, training grant maybe, or something like that, that's going to be in the $4,000 to $6,000 range. And it just depends on the amount of money they're asking for too, because the more money you're asking for, the more complicated the grant application becomes, right?
Yes.
So we spend more time, working with partners. We spend more time collecting information. Federal grants are much more complex than state grants. So we charge a lot for federal grants, but those grant applications can be 30 to 50 pages, sometimes more. They often have a lot of partners. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of forms that have to be filled out and those types of things. So we charge a flat fee, and that is based on the complexity of the grant and the number of hours, therefore, that we're estimating that we're going to be required to do that. The other thing we do is we work on an ongoing basis with our clients. So we charge a monthly fee, and that includes all the research, all the writing. And so we charge a flat rate, and that makes it very easy for them to budget. They don't get charged grant by grant, so it's a much more economic way to engage with us, but always on a flat fee basis.
Well, and I think a really good way to think about this, because I have a number of clients that have applied for and received grants. And the thing that I hear from them, and I'm sure you hear this as well, it was so worth it to spend a little bit of money up front. I mean, we're talking $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, whatever, in that range. And we got a $500,000 or $1 million grant,
right?
To do so much good in our business and do all the things that you mentioned that they need to do, right? Invest in capital, equipment, people, etc. So I think in the long run, my perception and based on clients that I've worked with too, is that it is so worth it to spend that money and have a professional like yourself do what you do,
Right.
rather than trying to be your own orthopedic surgeon and do your own surgery on your knee, right? You're going to hire a professional, and that money is just well worth it, because that's a very small investment for the bigger amount of money you're going to get.
Yes, that's very true. So some of the advantages of hiring a grant professional are that, one, we know applications. We know what's required in those applications. So when we've seen clients try to do it themselves, and some of our clients that come to us say, listen, we tried to apply for a grant last year. It was unsuccessful. We always ask for that grant. We always ask, to see what they applied for, especially if they're applying for the same program.
Mm-hmm.
And what we find typically is that, one, funders don't really understand the acronyms, especially more the technology-focused companies. They don't understand all the terminology. Most reviewers, by the way, are not well-versed in the technologies they're reviewing on for some reason. I don't know why that's, but we know how reviewers think. So a lot of people on our team have been grant reviewers. So that's the one thing. So the one thing is that grant reviewers really don't understand, a lot of the terminology that people tend to use. So the language is very different. The other thing is we're very cognizant of the important things in a grant. What's important in a grant? So the things that most manufacturers might not think are important, like if you're applying for a training grant, what we would see as important is, why are you doing the training? What's going to be the outcome? What's going to result from you doing the training? Now, most manufacturers aren't going to think that way. They're going to think, I need leadership training because my leaders need help. They need help doing what they're doing. What we think of is more, what's going to change? So what's going to change because you did that training? Your leaders are going to be better able to lead. That's how a grant funder thinks, because grants fund outcomes. That is the one thing. If your audience hears absolutely nothing else today, they don't fund your activities. They fund what's going to happen as the result of you doing those activities. So that's another really important thing for your audience to know, is that when you come to me and you say, I want a grant to invest in this machinery, I want a grant to invest in this facility, what a funder wants to know is, okay, if you do that, what's going to happen? And does that outcome align with what they want to fund? If so, you're more likely to get the grant. You are much more successful at getting that grant. So making that kind of mindset shift into what's going to change is really going to help any manufacturer understand what grants are all about. Because when there's a training grant, most of the time they're looking for, how are you upskilling the workers? How are you helping them avoid layoff? How are you improving the economy? How are you, by investing in this facility, how many more jobs are you going to create? So you really have to think of not only what you're doing, but what's going to result from you doing that. So, yeah.
That is so helpful. I hope everybody listening, like, that was a mic drop moment, as my buddy Kurt Anderson would say. Yeah, that is so helpful. And so I feel like I was going to ask you, what are some of the mistakes that often get made when, let's say, a manufacturer tries to do the grant writing themselves? And I think that's probably a biggie. Is you're more focused.
Right. They want to talk more about what they're doing rather than what's going to happen. Right.
Right. So outcome, I feel like, is everything.
Yes.
And the difference, right, that you're going to make by using this money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there any other mistakes that you see, or things that get in the way?
I think the biggest mistake that I see is that what you say in a grant really matters. So if, for example, and we had this happen with a client that we just took on, and this happened before we were working with them, but they applied for a grant through their state and in that grant application, they committed to hiring X number of people. Well, as we all know, and is very well known, it's really hard to find people. So they were not able to hire the number of people they said. Anytime that happens, if you submit an application saying, for example, you're going to hire 10 people, and for whatever reason, you don't hire 10 people, the best thing to do is to contact the funder right away and to let them know, be proactive. Okay. This company did not do that. And then they got a letter saying, okay, because you only hired 80% of the people, we're going to claw back 20% of the funding because you didn't hire those people. So then they have to go through an appeals process and all that. And I don't love to see clawbacks happen, but it does happen. So what I like to tell people is, just like when you submit a loan application and you say, I'm going to build this house for this much money, that's why I need this much money from the bank, it's just as important to be conservative when you are submitting a grant application. Even if you think you're going to hire 10, but realistically, you're probably going to be able to hire 6 to 8, put 6 to 8. Don't put 10, because you leave yourself open to that. So that's one of the biggest mistakes we see made. The other one is that when grant funders say the deadline is July 31st at noon, if you submit that application at 12:05 on July 31st, it will not be accepted. So that is also really important. What the funder wants to see, even if it seems like the most inane thing, most grant applications have a font requirement. Most grant applications have a page limit requirement. Most grant applications have a limit on the margin size you can have in the application. And
Wow.
most manufacturers will look at that and say, well, why does that matter? Well, the font matters because it's easier for the reviewer to read. The
Right.
page limit matters because, by the way, if they get 1,000 applications, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to weed out every application that doesn't have the required page count in it. If somebody has 30 pages and they said they want 25, that 30-page application will get thrown out within 5 minutes, because the first thing that reviewer looks at is, did they meet the very minimum requirements? Did they use the font size? Did they keep to the page count? Did they do the margins?
Did
All of
they
it.
write their name and
Did
homeroom
they write
number
their
on the
name? Did they
top right
fill out
corner?
all? Well, and
I mean,
that's
for
the other
real.
thing. Filling out the right, you've got to fill out everything they say you've got to fill out. And it doesn't matter that we think that those things don't matter. They do matter. So those are the two biggest mistakes we see made, is that, one, they didn't meet all, they didn't fill out all the required parts of the application. Two, they didn't pay attention to the commitments they were making.
Right.
It's a legal agreement. When you submit a grant application and you sign that application, that is an agreement that you're going to do what you said you're going to do.
I think that's very important for everybody listening or watching to remember. I don't think I ever thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
And what a giant bummer it would be to do all that work on your own, right? Let's say I didn't want to pay somebody, so I've spent numerous hours, right, of time I didn't have, and I filled this thing out and I felt really good about it, but I didn't follow all of their requirements. I didn't follow them to the letter, and then I don't even that didn't even get considered. It just got thrown out.
Right.
That just kills.
Well, and one thing I tell clients, and I think this is the way they can best appreciate it. And like you said, if you need dental work done, you go to a dentist, right? You don't take the time to try to work on your own teeth. If you have issues with your eye, you go to an optometrist. This is very much the same thing. Most manufacturers don't have the skill set to really put together a competitive application on their own. If they're going to do it, they're going to spend hours upon hours upon hours of time they could have been spending doing something else that is more in their wheelhouse. Our involvement in grant applications allows them to do what they do best while we do what we do best. So that's the way that I put it to a lot of my clients is, if you invest in our services, we take that off your plate. You don't have to worry about that grant application. It will get done. It will be competitive, but you won't spend the hours and hours. You'll have to give us some information for sure, but you literally hand over the information and then we make it into a competitive application, and it is well worth the investment.
Well, absolutely. And I think maybe one of the misconceptions may be with, well, how hard could grant writing be? I'll fill out the application, I'll answer the questions, and I can just do it myself. So I think, wow, I hope everyone listening and watching this that this has been very eye-opening, because I think this is a true craft.
It is.
And area of expertise that clearly most of us don't have. And it's that difference between getting out of your own way and investing a little bit more in your business and yourself, and paying a professional to do something that's probably most likely going to be way more successful than when you try to go it alone. And I know
It's more efficient, and it's way more efficient.
Right.
Even on the research side, we spend hours looking for these grants for our clients. Our clients would spend hours upon hours because they're well hidden. They're on some very obscure part of a state's website. You have to go to the economic development department, and then you have to go to the business section. Then you have to go to the grants section. Then you have to go to the grants, not the loans. And I mean, the layers and layers that companies have to go through. And most companies, quite honestly, I can see a lot of manufacturing leaders that would just look at that and go, forget it.
Yeah.
I can't, I don't have the time. And that's why they put it off. So we do a lot of research for our clients. We do an extensive amount of research for our clients, but we can do it in, a couple of weeks, where it would take them, likely because they keep putting it off, it would take them months and months. Then they miss grant opportunities, and then they leave money on the table, which we never like to see.
Well, and I feel like too, you guys, it's almost sleuth-like. Like you have the skills where, let's say, the layperson who's running a manufacturing business has an abundance of other skills that they are really good at, but they don't have that sleuthing ability, because this would be a new territory for them, and they don't know all the ins and outs. So I think that's very beneficial as well, knowing that you guys have that. And we're getting to the end here. I want to make sure we touch on the most important things to include. And I feel like we've already talked about a number of them, but if we were to give people like a quick cheat sheet, if you will, or checklist, what are the most important things to include in a grant application for success?
Right. So one, making sure you include everything the funder wants to see you include. Just a general statement. I think the most important part of a grant application is a well-fleshed out project. So we have a lot of clients that come to us and say, we're going to add to our facility, we're going to hire people, we're going to invest in equipment, we're going to train our people, we're going to put in a new software system. So that's 5 different things. One of the biggest things is for us to get them to identify all the different parts of their project, because one grant likely won't fund all that. One grant might fund the equipment and the job creation. Another one would fund the training. Another one might fund the software installation. So we like to get a really well-defined project. Now, what is in a well-defined project? The one thing is, what activities are you going to do? Again, that's the, equipment investment, facility investment, so on and so forth. The next part is, who's going to do it? So are you going to need contractors? Are you going to need bids from those contractors? Are you going to need internal labor? Are you going to need engineering firms? Are you going to need training providers? So all the resources. The next thing is, what cost? What internal costs are you going to incur because of that? So we like to get just at the beginning, just broad numbers, because that helps us really target the grants they should go for. If they're going to spend $5 million and it's a $5,000 grant, it's really not going to make a big dent. But if there's a $5 million investment and some grant program will pay $1 million of that, then it's worth a little bit more money. Right. So we like to know what their overall budget is. With training in particular, it's also really helpful to know who you're going to train and that you have all your training quotes in hand. So before you apply for a training grant, you need to know what courses you're going to deliver, what's in those courses, what's the outcome, what's the person going to learn, who's going to be trained, so what specific employees are going to be trained. And many times they want to know their hourly wage, because that can play into in-kind through the company, that can play in-kind contribution. So when they pay their employees, that's money they're spending toward the training, and some will consider that in the cost share. So that's another really important thing in training grants. So basically just a really well thought out project. What we hate to have happen is that a client says, I'm doing this, but I don't have any information. I don't have any quotes. I don't have this, and I can't get any. That's not really helping them, and it's not helping us do a good job for them. So right. A really well thought out project is probably the most important thing.
Fantastic.
And the outcomes, knowing what's going to happen when you do this is probably the most important thing as well.
Well, I am just so thrilled. I think this is a topic that we need to cover regularly on this podcast. I feel like manufacturers are leaving money on the table in a number of areas, but this one is like, hey, the money is there. So I want to encourage them to go get it, because what they're doing, and that's you listening, is so important to our nation, to our economy, and on a global scale. And I think you and I are both incredibly passionate about supporting these folks and these companies that are doing this work. To end, like, what is your favorite part, Micki, about helping manufacturers succeed? Like, what is do you have a favorite part of the process or an aha moment?
My very favorite part is when I find out that a manufacturer that we helped got money, because what I know is that money is going to go toward creating jobs, making their company better. It's going to make the economy better, and it's going to make the future of American manufacturing more solid. And really, the purpose for our company is to ensure that future generations have manufacturing jobs. And the only way we can do that is by helping fund the success of American manufacturers. So anytime I find out that I had a client that got $8 million from the state of California, but through that, they were going to hire like 20 people. They were going to invest in an old facility. They were going to upgrade it. They were going to put in electrical that they desperately needed, which is going to make a safer working environment for their people. When I find out that that happened, and I know we had a part in that, that's the best. That's the best.
Oh,
And I
wow.
have grandchildren, so I'm a little concerned about future generations. I like to know that I had some part in helping make the world a little bit better place for them.
Oh, I love that. Well, you know what? Would you come back sometime?
Sure, anytime.
I think you're fascinating, and I think the work that you're doing is incredibly important. And you're very well spoken to. Like, I really enjoy listening to you, and I think that the way that you lay everything out just makes so much sense. And I'm a fan of that authenticity, and I don't want to say simplicity, but I really do appreciate that. So you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for you listening, I just want to remind you that we know that you have a lot of different choices of how you can spend your time, what podcasts you can listen to. I just want to take a minute to thank you for investing some time in yourself and your business, and for choosing to spend some of that time with Micki and myself today. And I hope that we've given you some golden nuggets to get out there and get some money for your company to expand and grow. So thank you for the work that you do. It matters. And we will see you next time.
If you're not already, subscribe to the Manufacturing Masters podcast on Apple Music or Spotify. And for a deeper dive, head on over to manufacturing-masters.com. It's everything they never taught you in school.